times.
Yeah, this is really good because I mean, our students and all that. I mean, and whenever I've written, it's brewery finance that everybody wants. That just freaks them out.
Sure. Yeah. How do we do it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. How much money and where the hell am I going to get it?
Yeah, absolutely.
great.
So
This is going
Yeah,
to be a great
we'll see if we can
collaboration.
answer that for him today and talk a couple
yeah,
people out of start a brewery.
I think people should. There's still lots of room for breweries.
Yeah,
It's just not like it was in the 90s.
sure.
But let's go ahead and get started here today. This is very exciting. This is Brewery Finance's first live event. So today we are speaking with Tom Hennessy of Colorado Boy Brewing, and we're going to be discussing the topic, how much does it cost to start a brewery? We'll be looking at a few different perspectives, looking at starting from scratch and scaling a brewery, both from an operations cost perspective, an infrastructure cost perspective, and then we're going to be talking with Rick a little bit about the financing components behind that. I am Kayleen. I'm going to be your host today. I am in the marketing department at Brewery Finance, and so happy to help arrange this. And just so our participants know, if you have any questions at any point and you want to send them out in the chat, if they're highly specific to what we're talking about, we'll answer those in the moment. Otherwise, we are going to save some time at the end for a Q&A. So send us your questions or hold on to them, whatever feels right as we go through the flow today. We're going to kick off with some introductions. Let's go ahead and hear from Rick at Brewery Finance. If you could just give us a quick introduction to yourself and how you ended up in the craft brewing space, particularly in the finance niche of that.
Sure. Thank you, Kayleen. Yeah, my name is Rick Wehner. I'm the founder of Brewery Finance. I started the company in about 2005, and it was kind of a I wouldn't say spur of the moment, but a kind of serendipitous career change for me. My brother and I had just started an equipment finance company, and at the same time, I was friendly with Kevin DeLang, who's the owner of a homebrew shop in Aurora called the Brew Hut. And he said, "Hey, Rick, I'm starting a brewery and I need some help painting the walls and whatnot." He knew I used to be a house painter. So I joined him at the brewery, which is Dry Dock Brewing, back when it was just a tiny little thing with a couple bar stools. And I helped him paint the walls. And as I was painting the walls, I noticed he had the Brewer's Resource Directory sitting on the bar. And I started thumbing through it and saw that there wasn't a single finance company listed under all the vendors for these breweries. And of course, it was a much thinner directory back then than it is now. But the next day I thought, well, I know a lot about brewing equipment and I know I love the industry and I happen to own a finance company. So I think I'll start a company called Brewery Finance. And at that time, it was just a trade name of our other company. But I went to the Brewers Association the next day and introduced myself and kind of just hoped, well, I'll just get a deal here and there every now and then just to make the other parts of my job more tolerable. But being in the right place at the right time seemed to pan out for me because I was very quickly working almost exclusively with breweries and distilleries and meaderies and all that kind of thing. So I've stuck it out since then. We've seen a couple different changes over the years. Our company was acquired twice, and then recently, about a year ago, I just acquired it back. So we're a small company again. If you deal with brewery finance, chances are you're going to deal with just me. And I certainly enjoy it that way. I like having the flexibility and the personal connection with our clients. So
Fantastic. Thank you, Rick. And Tom, I'm really excited to hear from you. If you would give us an overview of how you ended up where you are today with Colorado Boy Brewing. What was your journey and kind of what is your niche right now?
Okay, so restaurants with my childhood friends. We started doing restaurants in New Mexico. And in 92, we had a wood oven pizza restaurant that I decided, because I had been homebrewing a little bit, to add a brewery to it. And my partners weren't into it, couldn't spend much money. So I coined this term called Frankenbrew back then, where I just kind of hobbled together dairy equipment and old Grundy tanks and things like that. And I made our first brewery back in 92. And then we moved to Colorado in Salida, did another Il Vicino, they were called, and built a brewery there, and then did a movie, video, VHS, called Frankenbrew in '95. Um, and eventually, we expanded that company. We opened some more, Colorado Springs, another one in Albuquerque, and then other locations. Then I sold to my partners, became a park ranger, went back to a brewing, opened a packaging brewery. Uh, then I did some more park ranger stuff, and then we moved to the little town of Ridgway, Colorado, and opened Colorado Boy Brewery, and opened another one after that. So about 7 breweries later, I decided to start teaching people formally how to open their business, not just how to build breweries, not spend too much money, and get into the business. And we've so far helped about 130 or so open, and most of them are all doing well that I know of. But I have to add something to what Rick said. When he was helping Dry Dock with their first brewery, that was my equipment. In fact, that first mash tun of Dry Docks, I built that mash tun in our first brewery in '92 out of a Grundy tank. And eventually it moved up to Palisade. When I had the Palisade brewery, a big packaging, I used it for, I think, our pilot system. And then I sold it to those guys because I think they had a home brew shop, right? And then they wanted to be a brewer. So I sold them that a kettle and my mash tun. And I know where that mash tun is. It's in 2 more different breweries. So that used equipment goes a long way. Anyway, so I didn't mean to wander, but yeah. So what I do now is I help people in the brewing business to open breweries, and it's kind of from beginning to end, teaching them the business systems, everything that's involved in the brewery, not just the brewing and putting the equipment together, but just opening a brewery. So that's what I do.
That's fantastic, Tom. Wow, congratulations on such an exciting career and having the opportunity to help more than 130 breweries get started. And I love
It's been fun.
the idea of the Frankenbrew, and I think that we'll probably dive into that a little bit more when we get around to talking about equipment and bootstrapping and ways to save some costs around starting a brewery. So this is clearly your area of expertise. I'll let you get started, Tom. Tell us how someone who's looking to start this journey gets started. What do you do on kind of day 0 and day 1 of this journey?
Yeah. Well, first you have to ask yourself what kind of brewery you're going to do. There's basically 3. There's a packaging brewery. There's a tasting room brewery, which is, could be a warehouse where you're brewing beer and you've got a place where people can come in and it's like a bar. And there's a brew pub, which is a restaurant that brews their own beer. First thing I say, don't do a packaging brewery. There's too many of them. It's very expensive. It's hard to find shelf space. I can go on and on. Not say don't do it, because you may have a pathway to do that. You may have tons of money, or you may have good financing, or you may have this great idea and this great product that you want to do. Yeah, open a packaging brewery. I would concentrate on deciding whether you want to do a tasting room brewery or whether you want to do a brew pub. Once you know that, then it's going to be there's going to be some legal things. What is your legal structure? Are you an LLC? Are you a corporation? You're definitely going to be between those 2 things. I'm not a lawyer, but you don't want to be a sole proprietor in a liquor business because of what's called dram shop liability. You have to come up with money is the first thing. You have to, no matter what, you have to come up with seed money. You have to come up with some of your own money, because the IRS wants you to fund your company. Even if your initial funding of your company, which is your stock, is $4,000, the rest of it can be borrowed or financed or whatever. But you have to start coming up with some money. So that's going to be a second mortgage. That's going to be selling your jet ski. That's going to be just having garage sales, doing whatever you can to come up with some of that money. And then it's going to be pooling your resources. It's going to be talking to your friends, your relatives, Does anybody want to get in on this? Will they lend you money? Best not to have partners, in my opinion. Uh, so money is number two. So number one was, what kind of brewery you're going to do. Number two is how are you going to come up with a pool of money to begin with. Number three, I think, is the type of location you pick, and that's going to determine a lot of things. If you're gonna buy a piece of land and build a building, you're going to need a certain amount of money, which you probably don't have. Uh, I am a huge proponent of finding, if you're a tasting room brewery or a brew pub, is to find an existing restaurant, some kind of a food service place. It can be a donut shop, it can be a coffee house, it can be an old Pizza Hut. There's a lot of those because they've remodeled them. The restaurant business is notorious for short shelf life. So there's always restaurants available. Either you can just lease one, you can go into a restaurant you like that's been there forever and say, hey, would you consider buying or selling this restaurant? I mean, there's a lot of ways you can get in there. And the advantages of which I'll go through really fast. If you buy or lease an existing restaurant, it's got the heating and air conditioning is already in place. It's got bathrooms that are probably up to code. It's got floor sinks, floor drains. It's got a grease trap. It's got a hood. It's got a parking lot that's probably paved and lighted. It's got signage. And it probably had a liquor license in the past, which means as far as your town goes, what you're doing is you're dealing with what's called an existing use. You're not changing the use, because if you're changing the use, if you take, like, say, a peach warehouse and turn it into a packaging brewery like I did in Palisade, well, that was a change of use. And that just triggers all kinds of code things you have to do, which it just takes extra time and extra money. But if you take a Pizza Hut and you turn it into a brew pub, that's pretty inexpensive. I bet you it's already got the music system in it. It's probably already got a floor safe in it. It's got all these things that you don't even think about that you're going to need. So that's going to save you a bunch of money up front, and it's going to save you a ton of time because it's an existing use. A brewing setup is not that much different than changing out a grill to just a giant soup kettle. It's pretty much the same thing. In fact, you could put your brew kettle underneath the hood for ventilation. So that's number three. Number four is the type of equipment. I am a big proponent of Frankenbrew, which is, piecing together your equipment. I'm a huge proponent of a turnkey system because they're just great. When I say Frankenbrew, if you don't have a lot of money, I would say at least start with a brand new brew kettle, because that's kind of the heart of your whole thing. And then there's enough used equipment, you can buy used equipment out there. When we started Colorado Boy, and we started teaching, it was very hard to find used equipment, and that was in 2009, I think. And we actually talked some friends in Colorado in our neighborhood into manufacturing, and they are doing an amazing job because they're so creative. Rocky Mountain Vessels up in Montrose. I would buy one of their kettles. If I had no money at all, I'd at least buy their kettle and then build around it. And then if you had more money or you could finance it, I would just buy a full setup with them. Another one is ForgeWorks here in Ridgeway. And then I've noticed that there's regionally, a lot of people are building equipment and really high quality stuff. So the equipment is what's going to save you a lot. That would be number four. And the fifth one, I would say, if you're opening a brewery, is your concept. What are you just going to be another brewery that makes sours and hazy IPAs? What can you do that's going to be different? Because right now you can get great beer anywhere. You don't have to you don't have to have a brewery or a brew pub to have great beer. You can go into any chain restaurant and get some pretty decent beer on tap. So how if you want to open a brewery, it means you're a brewer, probably a home brewer or an assistant brewer somewhere, or maybe you're the head brewer of some company where you just want to do your own thing. Um, your goal is to brew beer and to sell it, to be able to make a living, raise a family, have some great camping vacations, do some fun things and have a good lifestyle. Well, how are you going to do that? It's you're not your People aren't going to come just because your beer is so great, just because your IPA is better than the next guy's IPA. It's gotta what you are putting on is a play. You gotta see you want to create this bubble that that's you want to create an experience so that if people want to have that experience, they've got to come into your bubble. So how is your bubble different than somebody else's? I don't want to go off too much in a tangent, but one of the things that we teach is this concept of the oyster. And the oyster is basically your vibe. It's made up of five things: the music, the temperature of the music, the type of music, and the volume of the music, the lighting, the kind of lighting, and whether the light's up or down. I won't go into it too much. The temperature. Um, just for example, you go into a lot of restaurants, you go into Phoenix in the summer, and anybody from Phoenix will be going into that restaurant wearing their sweater because they know it's going to be freezing. And the reason it's going to be freezing is because the crew has got the air conditioner cranked because they're not thinking about the customer. So the temperature, you've got to think about the temperature. The number four is something we call cleanliness, and it's the orderliness of your facility, but it's not just the cleanliness, but it's your systems that keep things looking good. Um, a person that doesn't have a good system, uh, with that much traffic is going to show wear and tear after 6 months. Whereas, love or hate Starbucks or Chili's or whatever, you name the big chain, it still is in still pretty good shape, 10 years after it was open. And it's because they have a system that keeps it in order. So number four on the oyster is, that is having a system in place that keeps things clean, keeps things in repair, keeps things working. But number five on the oyster is the one I want to really talk about. And this gets back to that bubble. It's what is your stage setting? You're putting a play on. What is your brewery about? If I say, I've got an English pub, I don't, that's all I need to say. You understand exactly what it's probably going to look like. Kind of what the beers are going to be like. You know what it's going to feel like. You kind of know what the lights are going to look like. Um, you get the whole vibe. If I say, I'm doing a surf brewery, then okay, I know what kind of beers I'm going to get. I know what the light is going to be like. I know what the guy or the girl behind the bar is going to wear, for their uniform. So before you go into this business, yeah, you want to make beer. Well, what kind of beer do you want to make? It's one of the first things I ask our students. What kind of beer do you like? What do you want to make? I want to, I love English ales. Oh, do you like cask ale? Oh yeah, okay. Well, why not a true Irish pub with cask ale, or why not a true Scottish pub with cask ale? Nobody else in your town's doing that. You have six beer engines. Have some carbonated version, but beer engines. Wow, now you've got something. Now you've got a niche. You got something different. You're not competing. In fact, we had a student in the LA area. He was Scottish and she was a bagpipe instructor, and McLeod Brewing. And they were trying to figure out how, with no money, how they could survive in the LA area. So do a Scottish pub, which they did. And I think it's been 10 years now. And I think they have a second location. So what I'm getting at is you've got to figure out, well, first, what kind of brewery you want to do. You got to figure out where you're going to get the money. And then you want to save as much money as possible. And you're going to do that by the location, that would save you the most money, by the type of equipment and how you put that together, and then kind of what the vibe is going to be, how you're going to create that bubble, that if somebody wants to experience that, they got to go to your place rather than buying your beer at some other bar. They're just going to go to your place, because then, you're selling that pint of beer with no delivery costs, no packaging costs, for $6-7 a pint, and your raw costs are 25 cents for that glass. That's your raw cost. So that's going to pay for that great mountain bike trip that you want to take. Or like Doug Odell used to do at Odell's Brewery, used to take his brewers to England and drink beer, and you can't do that unless you're profitable. And there's nothing wrong with making money. You're probably not going to get super rich, but you can have a pretty nice lifestyle. Did I answer your question? Is that kind of what
Yeah,
it goes?
thank you, Tom. That was great
Yeah.
to hear about all of that, all of the steps. Thank you for breaking it down. And I, especially since I'm a marketing junkie, I really resonate with the concept piece and your notion of the oyster, and really thinking ahead of time about how you're going to distinguish yourself. So thank you for sharing all of
It's
that.
it's everything.
Yeah, my question for you is, I'm thinking from the perspective of these prospective startup brewery or scaling brewery owners on the call with us today, and wondering what kind of documents do you recommend that people create during the planning phases? Do you recommend writing a full scale business plan and doing a pro forma and doing a cash flow analysis, those kinds of business schooly type things?
Um, oh, everybody's going to hate me for this. I think you should do it, because for your financing, you need to have all that paperwork in it. You need to think about. I don't know that I've ever read one of those documents that was correct. That the assumptions were correct. And I wrote about this recently. I think that you do those things because it's expected of you to do those things. And if you go to sba.gov, they actually will walk you through on how to build them. So you have to do them. But for you personally, what's going to do more, it's going to help you more than anything, is going to be a very simple break-even analysis. And people, it's a single spreadsheet where you basically say, well, what do I need to do to hit my break-even? You plug in what's your rent going to be, what's your loan payment going to be, what are your utilities going to be. I kind of know what my cost of goods sold is going to be. What's the minimum I need to do to know that I can make it? That's it. Because one of the best things that you can have going for you is to not have enough money, because then you're going to work. You're going to do whatever it takes to make that happen. So you need to know what that bottom line thing is. I know I need to do $32,000 this month. I've got to do that. And I'm going to do everything I can to either lower expenses or create more sales to hit those numbers. If you put up my email address, well, just tom@coloradoboy.com. People can send me just write me and I'll send them that spreadsheet. But take that spreadsheet, and then as you find your locations and you know what your brewing equipment, you know what your capital needs are, so that you can plug in what your loan payment is, you can figure out, you just fill in all the little spots, and it'll tell you kind of what you need to do. For example, like labor, depends on whether you're a brew pub or whether you're a tasting room brewery, kind of what your labor is going to be. So in it builds out, if I have so many servers, or I have a bartender, or I have a brewer, this is how many hours they're going to work, this is what they make, so that I come up with the monthly labor budget. Well, you can see, well, how little can I go with labor? How can I scale back to the goal is to find out what's that bottom line I got to do, because you've got to pay rent, you've got to make your loan payment. Those are the things you've got to do, and you got to pay your utilities and all taxes, of course. So to me, that one form is one of the most important things going forward that you need to know. The other things you need to do, because it's expected of you, the business community, That's what they teach you at your business school. You've got to have those things. Anybody that's lending you money wants to know that you've gone through that painful exercise of calculating your cash flow and things like that. But for you, as the brewery owner, you know, you need to know, what do I got? What's my bottom line? What do I have to do? Because those projections look nice, but the key is you want to know, what do I have to do so that I can make those payments to those people that have entrusted me with lending me money or with renting me this space. That's my important thing.
That's a really valuable perspective, Tom. And we do have a question from the audience looking to confirm that email address from you. So is that tom@coloradoboybrewing.com?
Tom at coloradoboy.com.
Okay, good thing we confirmed.
Yeah.
All right, so chatting that out to you guys now. So I'm curious, can you share possibly a little bit of an anecdote or a case study? Tell us a story about a brewer that you've seen do this really well and on what you viewed to be a really impressive Frankenbrew kind of budget.
Yeah. I mean, well, I've got a bunch of them. Some that went the other way too. But I just wrote about them last week. One of Dan Buonadono, he has Eagle Monk Brewery, and he's just a regular guy who, he was older. He wanted to change his career. No, I've got another one. This one's even better. I like Dan Buonadono, total Frankenbrew. And he's been open for 10 years. He's a happy man and he loves his brewery. But another one was Tom Sims. Took my class in 2009 or 2010. His business was pagers. Do you remember pagers? The business of pagers. And he was very smart. He said, I think pagers are going away because they just invented the iPhone. And so he said, I want to brew beer. And he was an older guy. And so he took the class, and he was from Portland, Oregon. And, we talked him into all these things I just mentioned. And he got an existing restaurant. And for very little money, he opened a brewery out of a brew pub. And they were successful. And then he opened a second packaging brewery and built it and spent a lot of money. But he did really well, and he just now sold them, I believe, and retired. But I have a bunch of stories like that, But I've had others that there was these guys in Ohio, and I talked him into, no, don't go to a big system. You don't need that. You just need a little, a 7-barrel system and Frankenbrew and stuff like that. And they opened, and immediately they were like going, why did we listen to you? We needed a 15-barrel system. We are doing $15,000 a day in sales. I cannot keep up. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Who would have expected? And they have, of course, expanded because they had to. I usually don't tell people to start with a 15-barrel system in a brew pub, but it runs the gamut.
Those are wonderfully inspiring stories. And so you mentioned that not all of them go in that
Some more.
direction, though. So I'm curious, can you share a couple common mistakes that you've seen that have kind of led to projects not being as successful for startup brewers?
I'd say all of our students that actually decided to go ahead and open a brewery, they all succeeded. I think the ones that have closed since, and there hasn't been that many, are the ones that did not follow the business system. I believe a lot of businesses fail because of burnout, not because of lack of business. And the reason they burn out is because everything is up to them. In other words, they open the doors in the morning, they're brewing the beer, they're covering for the dishwasher when he doesn't show up, they're doing the marketing, they're doing the books, they're doing the maintenance, they're doing the cleaning. And that's great your first year or two because you're so enthusiastic about it. But after year 5, it's like, I am just so over this. What do I got to do to get out of here? And that's where I see most of the business failures, is because they don't have a business system. And going back to Starbucks, and I teach this, the business system. I have another book on it too. I'm not plugging a book, but the business system is what differentiates the successful national businesses from the mom and pop. The mom and pop businesses have a better product than Chili's does or than Starbucks does. But yet those are the businesses that last for decades. And the reason they do is because they have a business system. You don't go into Starbucks and ask to see the owner. You don't go into Chili's and ask to see the owner. The mistake that a lot of small breweries make is it's built around their personality. There was a book written in the 1980s called The E-Myth by the author's name is Gerber. And the E-Myth, what he talks about is it's the myth of the entrepreneur that creates this huge thing. And it's a myth because it's really the systems that sustain the brewery. The entrepreneur comes up with the idea, the creative power, all the good juice that the business needs, but it's that nuts and bolts business system of checklists, of audits, of things that keep the thing running so that it runs just as well whether the owner is there or not. That's kind of what I've seen in our past students, were the ones they get so excited about opening their brewery, and they'll put 150% of energy into getting this thing open and financing it and getting the equipment and brewing this great beer, but they won't put in that 10% of energy it takes to actually institute the business system, to take the time to build a checklist. That dishwasher needs a checklist. How are they trained? What do they have to do while they're there? Every single position needs a checklist. and it's more than just checklists. There's a whole financial component to it all, but it's all very simple. And once you've put that energy in and put it in place, to maintain it takes about 2 minutes a day. That's it. And it's not rocket science, but that's, in answering your question, that's where I've seen people fail. Is they in fact, at one Great American Beer Festival, I went up to a bunch of our old students that were, their breweries were there. And I asked them, do you have a scoreboard, which is something we teach? And it's a very simple thing that takes no time every day. And it basically tells you whether you're winning or losing every day. And literally 9.9 out of 10 were not doing that. They didn't take the time to do that. They took the time to do everything else. They'll passivate their tanks. They'll harvest their yeast properly. They'll do all these things that are much more difficult, but they won't track their sales. So if that answers your question.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a great explanation and a really welcomed reminder that we can't skip over that stuff. I love that you were like, okay, the business plan, yeah, you have to do it, but these operating systems, that is going to be make or break. It's really crucial to the success and the scaling of breweries and small businesses, mom and pop shops, like you mentioned, at large. And a wonderful segue also over to kind of the finance half of the discussion today. So if it's okay, I'm going to take things over to Rick for a little while, for about 15 minutes here probably, and then we'll do Q&A. So thank you so much to everybody that's participating right now. And I hope you have a couple good Q&A questions for the end of this. So Rick, similar question to what I was asking Tom. If a individual is on like day 0 or day 1 of this journey, maybe they know that they have seed money of $5,000 to $10,000, but they're going to need maybe 4 to 5 times that much to actually move forward with their project. What should they be doing to get their ducks in a row and get started establishing a financing partner and being prepared for the next steps?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the biggest thing they should do is, if they do have partners, and excuse me, Tom had mentioned he's not a big proponent of having partners, and I've seen that go bad multiple times with customers of ours. And I've also seen some really good successful partnerships as well. um, but one thing I always tell startups is if you are going to have a partner, you have a very frank discussion with your partner or partners from the very beginning about what does your credit look like. Because I've seen a lot of startups never get going because one guy has a fantastic credit score and is a homeowner and has been taking care of business for a long time, and then their partner comes in and they just filed bankruptcy, and it's just really hard to get financing when that's what you're up against. So if you don't have a partner, you know what your credit looks like. I think in terms of in terms of establishing a relationship with a funding partner, I always tell people, if you don't have the money yourself and you don't want to give away stock in the company or sell stock in the company, you're going to want to start talking to your bank or to your friends and family or whatever. Banks are going to be rough to deal with. They take a very long time to come across with a decision, and they're going to take your personal assets and put a lien on them. And if I was starting a brewery and I didn't have the money, I'd probably go to a bank first too. It's probably going to be your cheapest source of money. But the reality is just not everybody is bankable, but that doesn't mean that they aren't financeable. Banks are just very, very particular. So I would say call around, talk to your local banks, talk to somebody who is an equipment finance person, and start building a relationship. And don't put yourself in the position where you've made a $10,000 deposit with your seed money to a vendor who's going to get you a nice brew kettle, and you need the remaining $20,000 tomorrow before they can ship it, and you still haven't figured that out yet. I think staying in front of that is really important. Because even though companies like Brewery Finance can work very quickly to get somebody approved and funded, you're going to want to know before you spend that $10,000 down payment if you are going to be able to get approved and funded, or if you need to go a different route. There's been plenty of people we've talked to over the years. I thought I wouldn't lend those people any money whatsoever, and yet they've gone out and they've persevered and they've had successful breweries. So one thing I love about brewers or brewery owners is that they're just very, very creative. It's you never know. I never know who is going to be successful and who isn't. But so that's where I would start. I would start with establish a relationship and know what you're talking about. I've had a lot of people who've sent me their business plan and it's incomplete. And I, like Tom, I don't know that if I could. I've had thousands of business plans put under my nose, and I don't know that I've ever read an entire one. they're very dry and boring, and they all say the same stinking thing anyways. And I remember talking to Sam Calagione from Dogfish Head years ago, and I had interviewed him for an article I was writing, and I asked him, do you guys do forecasts every year? And he said, yeah, every year we come up with a new forecast, and about a month later we blow it out of the water because we realize we can't follow it and nothing's going the way we thought it was going to anyways. So yeah, I don't know. I think I probably went over and above what you asked me, or maybe I didn't answer your question, but that's where I would start.
Wonderful. And so I'm imagining if somebody is ready to get pre-approved, we've talked about the power of the pre-approval in that equipment purchasing process, like you mentioned. So you need to put a deposit down, but then they're going to be expecting the rest of the payment within a certain period of time. So the power of having that pre-approval when you go into that entire process. If somebody was looking to do that, do they need to find every piece of financial paperwork that has any affiliation with anything they've ever done, or tell us a little bit about what is required to move forward?
Sure. So with companies like ours, we have a couple different ways we can go about getting people approved, especially as startups. We have what's called application only financing. So it's really, we have a one-page application. We pull your credit, we look at what money you've got in the bank for the business, and we make a decision. Can we finance this or not? So that's very quick and easy, and it requires very minimal input from the customer. We're really looking for your address, your social security number, and a little bit, what's the plan with the brewery? What kind of equipment do you need? But what we don't need is a personal financial statement and a complete business plan. We're kind of trusting that if you're starting a brewery or any kind of business, that you've taken the time to investigate whether or not it's viable or not. So that's the quick and simple way. Now we can get a lot more money if we have a lot more information. And the more information we have, the cheaper the money gets. Obviously with an application only situation, you're not dealing with very much information, and that's high risk. And with high risk comes higher rates. So if we can get last 2 tax returns, personal financial statement, and a business plan that was actually completed, we have a lot. We have more options in terms of how much we can finance, because it is hard to get a brewery financed or a brewery started for $40,000. It's most of the startups we work with are probably looking for $100,000 or $150,000, and that's just kind of enough to get them across the finish line. But I'll also say a lot of them, I think, are spending money unnecessarily because they found the perfect location without ever having been in the beer industry. And to Tom's point, they're going to have to put in floor drains, a hood. A hood is something that's very difficult to finance because it becomes part of the real estate. And so it's hard for us to finance that. We're never going to get it back. Floor drains and that kind of thing, to a finance company, those are worthless at the end of the day if you're not paying your bills. So I think a lot of people overspend, and very rarely do people come to me looking for financing on an old kettle they got out of some warehouse someplace. It's usually brand new, made just for them, which is totally understandable, but also not always economical.
So I'm curious, you might have just dropped the pot at the end of the rainbow here. This is called How Much Does It Cost to Start a Brewery? And you just mentioned that about 100,000 to 150,000 is probably a viable financing amount for getting started. I'm curious what Tom has to say in response to that. Does that align with the experiences that you've had? And if you were going to put a ballpark around it, would it be a similar figure? And I'll unmute you. Or actually, you'll unmute you.
Okay, yeah. So you're saying the entire open for business for $150,000?
That wasn't intending to say that. I'm just saying by the time they come to me, what they're looking for is $100,000 to $150,000 for equipment, and of course they've got leasehold improvements and marketing and raw goods that need to purchase and everything. So just by the time they come to me, they're looking for around that $100,000 to $150,000 range, and they may already have a lot of their equipment bought. It's just like, hey, we didn't realize we're going to run out of money, so this is what we need to get across the finish line.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, if somebody could give me the challenge of opening a brewery complete for 150, I can do it. But again, it goes back to the location, because like you were just, you were just mentioning, Rick, about the floor drains, and anything that's attached to the building becomes part of the building. You can even be walk-in coolers. So an existing restaurant is going to have all those things. So the money I need is for the equipment, and I need money for marketing, some leasehold improvements to make the place look good, the legal, the accounting, and some cash flow. So 100 to 150,000 if I have an existing restaurant, yeah, no problem. I can do that. Depending on the type of brew pub, if it's more Franken brew, if I'm really trying to scale it back, I can do the 150,000 is I don't even need that much, but I think the 100 to 150,000 is totally a safe number for all your equipment and having money left over for the other things as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Rick. Rick, I hope I didn't put words in your mouth there. I know you've always been hesitant to put a dollar sign on it. So
I love painting myself in a corner. I'm great at that.
Great. So I think I'd like to go ahead and transition to the Q&A part of the show today. I'm really excited to hear from our audience members what questions they might have for our two fantastic hosts, Tom and Rick. So if you guys want to unmute yourself and ask your question, raise a hand, drop it in the chat, whatever you're most comfortable with.
Hey, there's Jake.
Hey, Tom, I'm in. What's up? We've worked with Rick. We've done some financing. We're Downhill Brewing in Parker, Colorado, and we are under contract for a second location as we speak, but I got a question for you. Just sure, I'm learning all this the hard way. But if you were buying a turnkey brewery, Frank and Brew, new system, whatever it be, how would you evaluate the company if you were not going to use their brand?
How would you evaluate the company that was producing the equipment?
I'm going to buy a brewery that exists and change it to my
Oh,
own company.
so you want to know if you were buying that company, how would you evaluate what you're paying for that company?
Yes, sir.
So, if are you buying it as a asset sale, like they're closed down, or are you buying it as an existing business?
Well, I guess that's my question. So to me, I kind of see it as an asset sale because I really
Well,
don't,
if
I
it's
don't
an
care about their
asset,
brand.
if it's an asset sale, that's probably going to be less expensive unless they're not doing any business at all. Um, it's going to be what the used equipment is worth, and to get a good idea of that, I would go on to Pro Brewer and look at their equipment that's used, to see what it is. It depends, if is it a turnkey system with
It is, yeah. It's a
is it a
turnkey
known?
business, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, turnkey systems, they can be, depending on what, I don't know how many tanks or anything like that, or what the brand is, but it could be as little as $60,000 to 100, 125. If it gets beyond that, I just buy new. I wouldn't buy their used stuff. But there's also going to be some value in all their leasehold improvements as well that they might want to try to get. There can also be value in the lease because you're taking over their lease. If it's a great lease, there's some value in that. Everything's negotiable. And also, will they finance it themselves? I mean, is this kind of the deal where you'll give them like 20% down and they carry the paper? That's typical when you're buying somebody's business. You give them 20%, 25% down. There's all kinds of ways to approach it. There's no one way, but you're basically going to be getting a good deal by buying somebody's business in your expansion. Good for you.
So side note for you here. We are Downhill Brewing Company. We bought Elk Mountain Brewing Company.
So you've got the
Established,
mash tun.
we've got the mash tun.
There's a lot of my blood, sweat, and tears in that mash tun.
That thing's got some miles on it.
That mash tun has won so many GABF and World Beer Cup awards. It's amazing.
Our first year of business, we won a bronze medal at GABF for Kolsch with it.
Excellent. Makes me very happy. Yeah, so we're related now.
I'll take it. Next time I'm in Montrose, I'll stop by.
Yeah. Well, I
Wow,
hope I answered your question, and you can email me with any more details if you want.
I'd like to interview that mash tun. We'll have to have it on for our next live event.
I featured it in a new brewer article once.
Oh.
We've actually upgraded to a new custom built 10 barrel system in house. So we have that in storage right now, and we're not sure what we're going to do with it.
Well, I know Dry Dock wants it for their museum or something.
Thank you, Jake, for that question. That was wonderful. Any other questions from our participants? Go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question. Well, I'm not starting a brewery, but I have a question for you, Rick. I'm curious, we've talked before about ingredients, and can you finance ingredients the same way that you can finance equipment? And like, what is kind of the process as it compares for that?
Yeah, we cannot finance ingredients the same way we'd finance equipment, but we can finance ingredients. So an equipment financing deal could go anywhere from 2 to 5 years in terms of the length of the finance term. We can do short-term working capital loans for brewers as long as they have been at least 6 months in business. So it might be hard for a true startup, but it is short-term working capital. So if somebody comes across a great deal on bulk purchase, or they want to get together with other neighborhood brewers and drive the price down somehow on cans and lids or whatever it is that they're looking to purchase, and they don't have the cash to take advantage of it really quickly, we can get quick short-term working capital for them. The process of getting approved is basically the same. It's a one-page application, your last couple bank statements, but in this case, there's no collateral. It's just a quick and dirty loan, and we can either do like weekly payments for the repayments, or we can do monthly payments. It's going to be pretty expensive, so you have to get a pretty deep discount on those ingredients or whatever it is that you're looking to purchase. Most of the working capital we provide is for a brewery that may be coming up on payroll or something like that, and they're realizing they're a little short because they haven't been paid by somebody else, maybe their distributor or something, and they just needed something very briefly to get them across the gap, and we can provide that kind of thing.
Wonderful. And Tom, is that ever a category where somebody would be looking to save? I kind of imagine in this day and age, quality is king. Are people typically looking for the highest quality ingredients? And is there ever any like financial wiggle room around making that an area for savings?
Well, brewers want the best quality. I will say, if you're like a brew pub, you're getting a lot of ingredients. You're not just getting beer ingredients, you're getting food ingredients. So that as you're opening, let's say you're opening a brew pub, the distributors are going to find you, Cisco, US Foods, all these big companies, and they want that first order. And you don't want to get caught in the trap where you're buying everything from Cisco, because if you're buying everything from Cisco, you're just kind of stuck with that. So I recommend for mozzarella cheese or things like that, even a decent quality, they're all going to have different prices. So I always, you have say a food ordering sheet. You would talk to your distributors every week. What's your price on mozzarella? Once you've sourced what that is, and find out what the best price is. And I say this all the time, but our business is a business of pennies. You really are trying to save pennies here and there. You don't want to cut quality, but the salesmen for these companies, they have a lot of leeway in what they can charge you. And depending on the type of food you're selling, it can be hundreds of thousands of dollars a year you're spending on that. And if you can save 2%, well, there's your vacation right there. So it's, but as far as brewing equipment go, brewing ingredients, man, I'm all for, getting the best. Don't cut corners on your quality at all. Not with your food either. Yeah, my wife and I spent 2 months in France last year. It was great. And boy, talk about quality. You don't see cheap food anywhere. Life is short. Go with quality.
Agreed. Wonderful. Any questions from our audience members?
I've got a quick question for Fran. Fran, I see that you're in Minnesota. Are you any relation to Todd?
I am, yeah. It's my father.
Is that right? Look, I know
Yeah.
Todd.
Yeah. So we're my father's been in the business a very long time. We are transitioning our businesses. We were contract brewing for a long time, and we're opening a taproom brewery here in St. Paul, Feitenberg Brewing Company.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
Excellent. Very well. Thank you for joining us, and tell your dad hi.
Likewise, I will. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Steve, do you want to tell us what type of business you're going to be starting, if that's going to be a brew pub or a tap room or packaging brewery?
Right now, we're looking at starting a tap room. We're coming out of pharmaceutical, so we know a good bit about the fermentation and all that good stuff. Done some home brewing, so just looking for a transition and starting to figure out how to get into it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yep.
All right, Tom, Rick, any final words of wisdom for our guests here today?
You know, was thinking about this, adding one thing to what Rick was saying about, well, it had to do with cash. Every time I've opened a business, I never seem to, in talking about cash flow, you're so used to budgeting money for this and budgeting it for that. And then comes the day when you open and money is going to the bank. And it always surprises me because, you know, everybody says you've got to have 6 months to a year's worth of cash to sustain you until you get going. But once you start making deposits into the bank every single day, it's really not as tough as you think. And if you don't spend a whole lot of money and you're smart about it, we've always been profitable within like 3 months, 4 months of opening. And a lot has to do with that cash that's coming in. And yeah, I'm Mr. Cheap. So I would tell everybody, don't be afraid to do this. You know, the people that make money, a lot of money, are brain surgeons, some lawyers, people on Wall Street, people who can, you know, do that. But it's hard to make, you know, to make a lot of money and get ahead in life just on a paycheck. It really helps if you have your own company, because you build some value there. You build this entity that's worth something and becomes a legacy. So yeah, don't be afraid to jump in. And yeah, it's risky, but so what? You know, especially if you're young, who cares?
I love that. I as you say that, I just am sitting here thinking, yeah, Wall Street, surgeons, all those people end up at brew pubs or breweries. So we can take their money. That's okay.
Some of them want to open breweries too.
That's right.
Get me out of this business.
Wow, that was just fantastic. Thank you so much, Tom Hennessy of Colorado Boy Brewing, for joining us today. And of course, Rick hosting from Brewery Finance. And thank you so much to our guests that joined us and participated in this conversation today. We really appreciate you. We are going to be putting an edited version of this recording up on our YouTube. So if you are not already receiving our emails, which is I'm assuming that's how you ended up here today, but feel free to chat us your email address if you'd like to get added to our newsletter list. We will send out the video recap so that you can rewatch this and soak back in all of this knowledge.
Thank you so much, Kayleen.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate it. All righty.
Thank you, Tom.
All right. Thank you, Rick.
You bet.
All right, Kayleen. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.